teacher, Rabbi Goldstein.
Good job, Miss Carl.
Good job, Miss Rabbi.
I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to tell a story tonight. I just felt like I'm in a story mood. And I'm going to tell a story that I first heard, I can't remember how young I was, in junior congregation at the shul in which I grew up. It's a story like almost all the stories that I heard as a kid. It's a story about a Jewish story about a poor couple in Poland, right?
Wow.
That's like
I've heard that one.
Right, exactly. Wait, oh, forget it. I'm good. Right. It's like, oh, this is the Three's Company with a misunderstanding. So that was a nice pop culture reference from 40 years ago. Here's a story of a poor couple in Poland. This couple tried everything to make a living. They tried everything you can imagine a poor couple would do in Poland, and finally, the wife and the husband had heard about this place to go where you can find your fortunes. It's across the sea, and the wife, we'll call her Sarah, she said, go across the sea and make your fortune. The man, we'll call him Mendel, he said, you know, Sarah, I don't want to go. And she said, you know what, Mendel, go. I know you're afraid of boats. It's okay. You go across the sea. I'll be fine at home. I know you don't like to travel. Is it a Jewish man who doesn't like to travel, doesn't like, motion sickness? I'm sure he was lactose intolerant as well. Very different than most Jewish men. And she said, go, go, go. And so she finally, Sarah convinced Mendel to go. And she packed Mendel with food and sewed him a coat with extra big pockets. It's a coat you can take off if it's too warm and put on if it's too chilly. It's got these pockets. It could put everything on his trip. So he set out of town. He went to the harbor. He found a boat and found the captain that would take him across the sea. But since he's a Jewish man on a boat, and in our history, Jewish men don't fare very well on boats, turns out his fear was justified. The whole trip, the boat was tossed and turned and shaken by the waves. You're getting nauseous just thinking about it, aren't you? The waves were getting up, the sky opened up, and it began raining so hard he couldn't see in front of their faces on the ship. Mendel closed his eyes and hoped he would find himself back in bed with his wife. But that wasn't to be. The storm raged and raged until eventually the ship was wrecked. And the next thing he knows, Mendel wakes up and he can't even open his eyes because it's so bright. Even with his eyes closed, he sees how bright it is and he can hear the waves. So he figured he must be on a beach. And he felt a pain in his side. When he was able to sit up, the pain in his side went away, but what followed was a pain in, well, let's just say his seat. And he tried to slowly open his eyes, and he realized that the sand on which he was sitting was the shiniest, most reflective sand he's ever seen, and it was sharp. And he couldn't understand. And suddenly he reached down and he cut his hand on this sharp sand. When he looked down to see what had cut him, he thought it was going to be a shell or something, but it was actually the sand. See, the sand itself wasn't sand as we know it, but covering the entire beach where sand would be were diamonds. Mendel, finally, his eyes adjusted enough, he could open his eyes all the way, and he let out a yell like you've never heard, a yawp. And he did what anyone would do. He started stuffing in his diamonds. He started stuffing diamonds everywhere he could find it. And he jumped along the beach, and he was so excited. The cut in his hand didn't matter anymore. Nothing mattered. His pockets were bulging. And when he exhausted himself, he looked happy. For the first time in a long time, he was so happy. And then, being Jewish, the next thing he did was get hungry. He went from happy to hungry. And to his surprise, he saw that just off the beach, there were stores and restaurants. This wasn't some deserted island that no one had ever been to. So, Mendel marched himself into the closest restaurant he could find, and he sits himself down, and he orders everything. He's been starving from this trip. He probably threw up from the motion sickness, and he can finally eat. So he says, bring me everything you have, and he orders everything. And they bring him the food, and it's delicious, and he loves it, and he's sitting back like a king. And at the end of the meal, he reaches in his pocket, and he plunks down a diamond. And he says, the man starts laughing. He says, what are you doing trying to pay with that? He said, oh, I'm sorry. He reaches out in a couple. And the man says, what are you doing? Those are rocks. But that's not how we pay for things around here. You have to get our real currency. Potatoes. Mendel was saying, what? Yes, potatoes were our currency. Mendel was in shock. So the owner of the restaurant was a nice man, and he let him wash his dishes. He let him wash dishes to work off his bill. And Mendel worked hard and was offered a job as a dishwasher, and he accepted. He was a good worker, and he managed to earn some money, some potatoes there, and he worked his way up to manager. Soon the owner said to Mendel, you know what? I'm going to retire. The restaurant is yours. So this poor man, Mendel from Poland, gladly accepted and continued to grow this restaurant. And he became wealthy. And he made more and more money. He owned more businesses. After a couple of years of doing all of this, he remembered his poor wife. And he missed her. He missed her every day. And he said, I've got to go back. I've finally made enough that I can go back. So he sent a note to his wife that he was coming home. He hired ships to sail with him, a giant ship packed with all the potatoes as high as he could, another ship for another set of potatoes. And thankfully, this fear of the ocean didn't come into play this time. It was a smooth journey home. When he arrived at the docks, he stood on the bow of the ship, and guess what he yelled? Because everybody does on the bow of a ship. I'm the king of the world. He greeted his wife with a big smile. He opened his arms and he said, here I am. We're rich. Look. And his wife was crestfallen. She had seen her husband coming in, and she saw him at the bow of a ship covered in rotting sea salt watered potatoes that were getting old and stinky and a putrid mush. So she shouted at him, you fool! You were supposed to bring back money. You were supposed to make money, and you brought these lousy potatoes. Wasn't there anything good where you went? And Mendel sat down right there in shock, realizing how much he had forgotten, realizing the opportunity that was wasted. And he cried out. He cried and cried. And his wife, after she comforted him and consoled him, went to look if something was salvageable. And through all the potatoes, she looked, and you know what she found? That jacket that she had made him, that he wore on his first day. And she reached into one of the pockets. She saw the diamonds. She reached into another pocket, and she saw another set of diamonds. And she started celebrating and going crazy and being so happy. When she showed her husband, they smiled and they laughed. Without remembering it, without even meaning to, he had taken enough diamonds home that they would be set for life. Now, I said I heard that story for the first time when I was a little child. I've been hearing it ever since. And I can't tell you how many times I've thought about what it would be like to wake up on an island of diamonds. Thinking about what it would be like to pick it up as easy as a pebble. And it wasn't until I met my fiance and I had kids and I have this life, and I realized, oh, wait, I live on that island. We all do. We live in a place that has moments and has diamonds everywhere we look. We just have to know to pick them up, to cherish them, to not be fooled by everyone around who thinks that potatoes are the currency with which we live our life. It's the diamonds. They're the moments with families, the moments that fill our souls. The potatoes, those are money and they're important. They're status items and they're ego-feeding moments to pursue ambition and glory. But when we run after potatoes because we think it'll make us happy, we just end up with a putrid mush. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we get rid of all our possessions. I like my iPad and I like my stuff, my watch a little too much. There are, though, great things in this world. But we have to train ourselves to recognize, to remember what's truly precious, what's truly valuable, and to gather the diamonds while we can. Shabbat is about gathering those diamonds. It's our time on the beach, our time to gather our precious belongings, our parents, our children, our loved ones. Shabbat can allow us to come together free from the rush of everyday chores to celebrate our relationships and our love for one another. May we all be blessed to collect diamonds. May we be able to be rich in love and in true happiness. May we find our account balances filled with loving relationships, good deeds, and fulfillment. And may we be blessed to enjoy many beautiful moments together. Shabbat Shalom.
Amen.